I think the key thing that holds people back, and this comes back to the fear point, is fear. Fear of failure is really maybe the main thing that inhibits people from adopting a mindset of growth, because they worry any growth requires change, and change involves risk, and risk involves the possibility of failure. And so what I try to do is create a safe space for failure, right? To say, look, what I want to see is effort to make things better all the time. And then when you do that, when you're innovating and failing, I won't fault you for the failure as long as it was, well executed.
Right. Eduardo, welcome back to Unmute the Voices. How are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to have you back on our show in a different setting. The last time that we had a sit-down
I don't have to wear the funny headphones.
No, you don't. And we're actually in person. The last time was all virtual.
It was Zoom, yeah.
So for those people who don't know, you are the president of Seattle University, where I am a professor at. And you are now in your fourth year as president. How is that going?
Every year it's a little easier in some respects, and then also busier because you start to accumulate projects. So it's just it's nice. It's more familiar, less fear, but more work.
Yeah. So the fear has kind of gone away. What were you kind of fearful of?
The fear never goes away fully, but this is the first time I've been president, so I had no idea what that would mean. And I think whenever you're doing something for the first time, there's a level of fear, and then being in a new community, coming to a new university in a city that I've never really lived in. I grew up in Puyallup, so I never really lived in Seattle. But even having grown up in Puyallup, I was on the East Coast for about 30 years before I came back. So it was just, everything was new, and that's it's a fun and exciting, but an uncomfortable place to be.
Yeah. So walk me through kind of a day in the life of a university president. What is it that you do that we as the public might be surprised by?
Well, my sons, they look at my calendar, say, your job must be really boring, because most days I'm just in meeting after meeting after meeting. No 2 days are exactly the same. It's one of the things I like about the job. The variety of things that I'm working on is engaging and unpredictable, and it sort of taps into different parts of my personality. But, so I'll start a day, I might have to go meet with some potential donors or with some business leaders in Seattle, and then, meet with some of the people who report to me, and then maybe give a speech or introduce a speaker, and then, meet with student leaders or meet with staff, council, or academic assembly. It's just a kind of, every day is a different set of activities. The thing that would maybe surprise people is, and always the thing that surprises me, is how much time I spend worrying about the athletic program. That's always something that reports up to the president, and it doesn't really connect directly to other parts of the university. I mean, it obviously interacts with everything, but ultimately the president's usually responsible for athletics in a way that is different from other parts of the university, where I'm sharing leadership with the provost or with deans.
Right. So there's a lot of shaking of hands, as well as kind of following your own passions, because I know you love basketball and baseball specifically. So, are you the type of president who's like, we must win games? We must win games. Is that kind of your leadership style as someone who also enjoys sports a lot?
I love sports, but I think generally, and maybe more fundamentally, I just love to win, period. I'm just a competitive person in sort of any dimension of my job. I'm like, so athletics does tap into that part of my personality, and the athletic director has the same kind of mentality. We're both. She was a former student athlete, so we're both competitive. We're both sports fans and like to win, but we're not going to win every game. But winning is the goal. Winning championships.
What makes a winner?
I think it's all about the work ethic, the ethic of continuous improvement. I think that is maybe the most fundamental trait that unites winners across any number of domains, not just in athletics, but the kind of constant sense of dissatisfaction that pushes you to always try to get better.
Do you feel like in this moment as president, you're winning?
There are days when I feel like I'm winning,
and
there are days when I don't. I like the days when I feel like I'm winning more, but it's I can't sort of say overall. I feel like more often than not we're winning, and it's not it's a team sport, so it's not just about me personally, but I do think we're making really great strides in the right direction overall.
How do you inspire people or motivate them to become winners?
One of the things I take a lot of pride in is my ability to hire well. This is something that I feel like is an important part of my job, and I'm good at identifying talent and then recruiting people. And so often looking for that mentality when I'm hiring people. And so then it's easy because people who bring that to their work, it's really just about offering them some direction, but then they just take the ball and run with it. And that's a lot of fun, and they tend to work well together as well. The harder part is when how do you motivate someone that's not their natural inclination? And I describe my leadership style as kind of a coaching style where I'm asking questions and I'm kind of pointing in the direction and setting goals, and then trying to motivate people to adopt that mindset and achieve those goals. But sometimes, it's very hard to get people to change their approach to things. So I don't know that I have a kind of magic formula for that. But it's definitely, I think if you surround them with people who are doing that, people want to succeed and step up, So it's about getting that critical mass of people who have that mindset, and then offering some guidance and encouragement. I think the key thing that holds people back, and this comes back to the fear point, is fear. Fear of failure is really maybe the main thing that inhibits people from adopting a mindset of growth, because they worry any growth requires change, and change involves risk, and risk involves the possibility of failure. And so what I try to do is create a safe space for failure, right? To say, look, what I want to see is effort to make things better all the time. And then when you do that, when you're innovating and failing, I won't fault you for the failure as long as it was, well executed.
Right.
But what I really don't like is just falling into the routine of doing the same thing over and over again. That's the kind of unacceptable failure.
Is that kind of your fear you talked about earlier? Is the fear of failure? Is that your fear?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I think that's when you're doing something new for the first time, the fear that you're going to screw it up, and you that can be paralyzing.
Yeah.
Before I started the job, someone encouraged me. I think it was Kevin O'Brien, who was the president of Santa Clara at the time and was on the search committee that hired me. And he encouraged me to do an 8-day Ignatian silent retreat. And I went to the Jesuit retreat house in Gloucester, Massachusetts, which is just a beautiful kind of retreat house on the water in just north of Boston. 8 days, and the person who led my retreat had been a vice president at Holy Cross.
Okay.
And so he kind of knew the higher ed world a little bit, and that was the focus of our retreat was fear. It was like that we talked about where fear comes from and how to kind of grapple with fear, and it was great. It was really helpful and meaningful 8 days.
Do you feel, though, you're the first Latino president of of Seattle University, as well as the first kind of layman, the first non-Jesuit president at Seattle University, do you feel like your race has played a factor in your leadership style, or do you feel some sort of pressure being a man of color in a predominantly kind of white environment?
I think that so in every job that I've held as an academic, I have been the only Hispanic person in that role. So when I was a professor at Fordham, I was the only Latino professor in the law school at the time. When I moved to Cornell, I was the only, and maybe the first Latino tenured professor there. Went to Chicago, I was the only one. So came back to Cornell. I was the first Latino dean of an Ivy League law school and the only dean at Cornell who was, and then when I became president, same thing. So it's like in each case, I've gotten used to that. And there's certainly a sense of responsibility to, and that contributes to this, to the anxiety of the role, but a sense of responsibility to do well, and to create pathways for people behind me. But it's not just, I haven't found that, again, paralyzing, but it's sort of motivating for me. It's really what attracted me to being a professor at the beginning and then to being an administrator is the ability to have an impact on the institution's commitment to becoming a more inclusive place. And so, if you look at the leadership team that I've assembled, it's quite diverse. And I'm proud of that. It was true of my team at Cornell as well. And then, because I can only have so much impact on a university, right? So who I hire is what determines, where the direction that we're going to go. And then hopefully they're bringing those same values to their work. So,
there's been kind of this cultural shift, and clearly you are contributing to that in the diversity of people that you have on your team. Do you feel that cultural shift among kind of all different industries, especially in the sense of the rise of Hispanic, Latino people becoming more professionals, getting more visibility, et cetera?
It's hard for me to comment on other industries because I just don't. I'm embedded in higher education. I know that in higher education, there's simultaneously a great focus on this and uneven progress. But I think if you look over long periods of time, there is progress. I think Hispanic people we lag in our presence in higher education at every level, at the student level, certainly on the faculty, and in leadership roles. There are fewer of us than, no question, than the general population, but even as compared to other groups. I see movement, but it's slow, and I'm always, while I'm always proud to be the first person, doing this or that, it's always a little disappointing at the same time. Like, why haven't there been more? Right.
So what do we do about that? How do we change that?
We have to change our institutions. And I think that each of us, whatever role we have in the university, we can have that impact. And like the work you're doing at the university and outside the university is attracting, students of color into classical music, into string instruments. That is creating change, right? And then the engagements we have inside the university and the again, for me, the people I hire and then the actions they take over time will change culture and change institutions. These are institutions that are very slow moving, very hard to steer.
Right.
By design, they are decentralized, and people, stay. I mean, academic jobs. The reason that faculties are so slow to change is because these are great jobs, and people stay for 30, 40 years. Mm-hmm. And so, when you look at a faculty, especially in the context of rapid demographic change, the faculty is going to reflect the demographics of PhD programs 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And then it takes time to have the change that's already happening kind of filter into higher education. So, but if we're intentional about it, we can speed that up a bit. Right. But
so, do you feel though that for those of us who are of color, you're a Hispanic man, I'm a Black man, do you feel that there's more pressure or more is expected of us as people of color to open that door, and we have almost a social responsibility to bring others with us as we come in?
I think so. I mean, and people talk about, I was just having a conversation with someone about this the other day, this notion of invisible labor that faculty of color, there are different ways to think about this, but are expected to undertake, mentoring students, advocating for students. And because there are fewer of us, students who are more diverse than the faculty, right, seek out disproportionately faculty of color. And it's not that, only someone who shares every one of my identities can be my mentor. And I've had mentors who are white, who are great. Yeah, and they've been excellent mentors. So, but there is this kind of impulse, a very natural impulse that students have to seek out faculty who share, certain identities with them, and so there, you can document the kind of amount of service work that faculty of color engage in, and I think we do it because we care about this and we want to do it. So it's it's on some level a burden, on another level it's a privilege, but there's no question that it's time consuming, and that then puts pressure on the rest of what's expected of you as an academic. And one of the things that we've done at Seattle University is, and I think other schools, this is a model for other schools, we've adjusted our tenure and promotion standards to try to identify that kind of work, that extra work, take that into account in the tenure and promotion process.
So what sort of advice would you give to a faculty member of color who comes from a marginalized community as they are climbing the stairs of the ivory tower, who have felt not welcomed or accepted? What sort of advice would you give them on how to continue to move through that process of tenure and promotion?
I think about my own experience, and then I also, think about, the experience I have as an administrator. My own experience, there's a sense of isolation or loneliness when you're one of a handful, or the only one in your department. And then what's really important, one piece of advice, just drawing on that experience, was the connections I made across campus or at other universities. There was this great professor, Michael Olivas, at the University of Houston, who tracked and kept a list of all the Hispanic law professors in the country.
Wow.
And he would send that out every year to everyone on the list so that they had the contact information for everyone else at all the other law schools. So we were the only ones at our law school, but there were, let's say 100 of us or 200 of us or something across the country. And, you'd look at the list and you knew some of them and you didn't know others. And then at the annual law professor conference, he would organize a little gathering, some side, everyone would meet for drinks or whatever, and you get 20 or 30 Hispanic law professors who were meeting for drinks. And so finding your community.
Yeah.
It may not be in your department, it may not be even on your campus, right? But and finding your community and then supporting each other, I think is one piece of advice. And then the other is to push forward, even though it's uncomfortable and not always fair. But because you are, in becoming the first full professor of music, right? Black full professor of music at Seattle University within the country, right?
Black,
or second in the country.
Yeah, violinist in the country.
I mean, you're paving a road,
yeah,
right? That other people will find smoother because of the work that you're doing, and that, again, that can be nourishing, right? Just understanding the way that you're making it better for other people, the way that your discomfort contributes to that. So
then what do you say then to white colleagues who don't have that experience, who might deem a person of color as being too sensitive or blowing things out of proportion? What do you say to them who don't have that lived experience? Because that does exist.
Sure. I'm trying to think of an example where I've had to have that conversation with someone.
Uncomfortable.
It's often not shared with me. So,
but I would assume uncomfortable.
It is a very uncomfortable, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, those kinds of. So I've encountered that more, I would say, in the hiring process, where you feel like, holding candidates to higher standards. I think there's a sense that there's, we kind of in hiring. This is true in probably any number of industries, and it's true in higher ed as well. We look for people who remind us of ourselves, for a younger version of ourselves, and then we kind of that faculty find that very naturally engaging and appealing, and so there's a tendency to, and it can be any number of ways in which that person resembles, the interests or identities or methodologies, and so there's this tendency to self-reproduce. And trying to intervene in that is also uncomfortable.
You talked a little bit earlier about a faculty member finding their own community. I would assume as the president of Seattle University, you're the only one versus faculty who at least have other people around them. But you're the only one who can do that job. Who's your community?
So I have people I go to. I mentioned Kevin O'Brien, who was the president of Santa Clara. Now he's back in Connecticut, and something's bothering me. I will send him an email, and he's been very generous with his time and understands the role. And have a member of my board who was the former president of Loyola Marymount, and someone who's, again, kind of made himself available. There are other presidents. I'm going to Chicago this weekend for the AJCU, which is the Association of Jesuit Colleges and Universities meeting, and there'll be 20 presidents of Jesuit universities there. So you find people that you can compare notes with. There's definitely a sense of isolation in their role. I'm fortunate to have a really understanding wife who kind of was willing to let me talk about work way too much at home. Yeah.
Who's also an attorney too.
Yeah. No,
so she probably helps you with some of your arguments.
She does. Yeah. No, and she doesn't. She won very few arguments against her, but she doesn't pull punches and is very willing to tell me when I'm going down the wrong path. So that's great, and that's super helpful.
Unmute the Voices is sponsored by Key to Change Studio. Key to Change Studio is a violin and viola studio located in Renton, Washington, which allows middle and high school underserved students living in South King County an opportunity to take violin or viola lessons. For more information, visit their website at keytochangestudio.org. Now, back to Unmute the Voices. I want to talk a little bit about displacement. And I guess this is kind of parallel to what we've been discussing here. I mean, your specific scholarship is based on property and land use, as well as law and religion. And your work explores the way in which the law mediates the interest of individuals and communities. And in this world that is constantly changing and evolving, how can people find their own respective place in such a changing world?
Well, I've always thought of property as the institution that is designed to allow people to do that, right? When you own something, whether it's a piece of land or a house or, things like mugs and clothes, I mean, that's, we use that, the control that gives us over those things to help create an environment for ourselves, right? When you move to an apartment, it's a sort of a bare set of rooms, and then you hang all your stuff on it and you make it yours, right? And you create your space. Obviously the sort of most robust form of that is, say, owning your own home. Even renting an apartment is a form of, in the legal sense, it's a form of ownership, right? It's the lease is a kind of property that has a limitation in time, but it's still a kind of property, and it comes with all kinds of rights to control. Obviously, you're sharing that to a certain extent with the property owner, the landlord. But there are limits on what the landlord can do to restrict your control, right? That are imposed by law. So, for example, if you have a lease, the landlord can't keep you from welcoming guests of your choosing. Like that would be, even if they wrote that into the lease, it would be an invalid provision of the lease. You have the right to control who comes in and out of the apartment, and then obviously you have the right to decorate and even to make some minor changes to the apartment, like painting the walls and things like that. So property is the institution that's designed to create that space. And then the problem that we have is that the way property is distributed, people's ability to enjoy that freedom is vastly unequal in our society and has become more unequal over the last 40 or so years. Some people then take the fact of radical inequality and identify property as the problem, but property is not the cause of the inequality, right? Property is just the manifestation of it. And there was a great story about an economist in Texas who got called to testify. He was accused of being a communist, and I think he was called to testify in front of the Texas legislature or something. This is a long time ago. And they asked him if he was a communist. He said, "No, I'm not a communist. I believe in property. In fact, I believe in property so much I think everyone should have some." And that, I think that gets at the idea that the problem of people not having the freedom isn't a problem of property; it's a problem of distribution. But if you were to abolish property, you would lose the ability to create your own space. I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine what it would mean not to have property. And even in communist societies like Soviet Union or Cuba, people generally enjoy robust rights of ownership with respect to personal property, because that is it's just a fundamental part of the human experience.
Wow. You have two sons, one who just went off to college and one who's still at home. So you understand firsthand the experience that parents face with sending their kid off to college. In an environment where so many people are now speaking against sending their kids off to college because of economics and just the lack of value that people believe that universities can provide in terms of education, what sort of advice would you give specifically to parents who might be weighing the pros and cons of whether it's a good idea to send their kids off to college?
Yeah, it was so we just about, I guess now it's been almost 2 months, dropped my son off to college, and I was very emotional. I didn't expect it to be so hard, you know.
Really?
It was,
you cried?
I did cry a little bit. There are these milestones that you get ready for, like you get ready for, first day of school, and you get ready for, I guess your kid's getting married or that kind of thing. But the going to college thing, I didn't expect to be so dramatic. I wasn't ready for it.
Wow.
And
I thought it would have been a party at the house. Like
no,
you got one out of the house, one's, on their way out. And
we talk about how much, my wife and I talk about how much we miss him. And we, the dynamic changes, right? As soon as you take one person out of the house, all of a sudden, all of the kind of settled patterns change. So we're still getting used to that. The younger one it's been challenging for him because he's getting way more parental attention than he's used to.
Wow.
But when I was dropping him off, I thought, I'm really entrusting my son to this institution, and I, better treat him well, And I was thinking about that from the standpoint of the parents who bring their kids to Seattle University, and just thinking, it's an act of trust when you send your kid off to college, and it just sort of reinforced for me how important our work is. But yeah, there's terrible decline in trust in higher education right now, and a skepticism about its value proposition. There are a couple of facts that don't tend to get a lot of attention. One is that the actual cost of attending college hasn't increased in, I think it's over a decade now, because even though the top line price continues to rise, the financial aid budgets are rising even faster. And that's true, certainly true at Seattle University. So it's more affordable in some ways than it was a decade ago. The return on a college education is as high as it's ever been and continues to increase. There's really no more reliable way to move from poverty into the middle class than a college education. The people who are questioning that often have an axe to grind politically, and I think are really doing a disservice to first generation or prospective first generation students who would benefit immensely from all the advantages that come from college education, saying that and understanding that college education is not for everyone.
Right.
And there need to be other pathways, and vocational school and apprenticeships are also really important, and these are honorable livelihoods. And so it's not that everyone must go to college. I don't believe that, but if you have the ability and if you have that ambition, it should be available to you, and you should be encouraged to do it. And the people who are many of the people, and there's a lot of this kind of in the tech industry, see Elon Musk, kind of telling people they shouldn't go to college. But of course, most of those people either went to college and then maybe left or maybe completed it.
Yeah.
Or certainly in every case that I'm aware of, their parents went to college, so gave them the security and the freedom to, drop out and go start a tech company.
Right.
Right. And then when they hire people, they're hiring people from the fanciest colleges because they see the quality
and the value
that the education has brings. So I'm bullish on the long-term prospects for universities, but we are definitely going through a period of doubt, and it's we'll get through it. But it's been one of the most remarkable things that I've seen in my now 20 plus years in higher ed, and that I think we've probably experienced in many generations.
You mentioned in your last interview with me, when we talked, that your son had played violin and that you helped him practice during his lessons. Reflecting back on those moments with him, what lessons do you think you both learned during that time?
I mean, I think the thing that he learned, and I think about his trajectory as a human, and because he's now stopped playing violin. In fact, this was another sad moment because when we went to drop him off, he's going to Cornell where he was born and grew up, and where he took his violin lessons. And so we brought the violin back with us when we went to drop him off, and took it back to the man who sold it to us. There's a word for the kind of person who makes a violin.
Luthier.
Luthier. I'm not going to try to pronounce that, but he makes violins and also sells violins made by others. And so we brought it back to him, and he's gonna, it's on consignment. And because my son, I said, you might want to keep it, and because maybe you'll pick it back up again later. And he said, no, I'm done. But I still think there was great value for him he probably had 10 years of violin.
Wow.
He stopped in the middle of high school. The key one though was the work ethic. I think there's the Suzuki method does great things for your ability to memorize long sequences of numbers. There's no question about that. But really the life lesson for him was, if I spend time doing this every day and do it the right way, practice the right way, I will get better at this. And he did. He was a beautiful player. I loved listening to him play. And it may not be, he's not going. He always said, I'm not going to be a professional violinist, so why should I do this? And I said, well, it's valuable to just develop that sense of accomplishment and discipline, even if you're not going to go on and play violin in college or be a professional musician. And that those lessons are transferable. I think one of the things he sort of figured out slowly over the course of his education, if I put the same kind of thought and effort into my studies as I did in violin, then I will have success, or I'll have more success than if I don't. Some of these things I'm not going to go on and do professionally, and others I will, but there's a value to the pride of that you get from of the work ethic, of the mastery.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if things.
And it sounds like you kind of learned that too, right?
Because I played clarinet for like 3 years.
Yeah.
In middle school, and then I never played an instrument again. So I vicariously through him. I mean, just watching the trajectory of his skills. It goes from book 1 to book 2 to book 3.
Yeah. So you would encourage parents to enroll their kids in lessons because you see the value that it brings for kids.
Yeah, I think everyone should. It's like learning a second language. I mean, I think everyone should at least give it a try, and do it for a while.
So do you want to give it another try?
Yeah, sure.
Because
see what I remember.
I have a violin here for you. So
let's do it.
I want to reunite you with the instrument.
Let's do it. It's been a while. Okay. We spent with the Suzuki. I don't know if this is just a Suzuki thing, but we spent months, with him learning how to hold the bow.
Oh yeah.
And
because that's the number one reason why kids quit playing an instrument is because of the sound. Right? The sound, if it isn't pleasant to the ear, then the kid's not going to want to do it, or the parent's not going to want to hear it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the sound is the most important aspect to playing the violin.
Yeah.
So I'll do my best to make sure that you don't have any unpleasant sounds that come out of this.
Okay.
All right, so we are going to do a little impromptu violin lesson with Eduardo. Eduardo has already said that he's played the violin at some point, so he might actually give me a lesson today.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be fun to kind of reunite you with this instrument. Okay, so do you remember how to hold it?
Vaguely.
Okay, so first, this is called rest position. Do you remember that? Right?
And then,
but it's on the right side of your body. So I'll just place it here. Boom. Oh, look at you. You're a professional. So then you can place your left hand. Yep. Go ahead. Bring it up. Oh, look up. Oh, he's got it. Look at. See, I told you. You don't even need me. Yep. But let's do something here. So why don't you, can you have your nose face? There you go. Hey, there you go. Now, what is this called? Do you remember?
The bow. The
bow, yes. And that's with your right hand. So we'll go ahead and hold that, and I'm gonna just kind of place this here, and I'll fix a little bit. Look at you. You do kind of remember this. Now, do you remember to bend your thumb?
Yeah, the bending of the thumb.
The bending of the thumb, that's right. And I'm gonna come on this side, and yep, look at you. And then
what string are we on?
We're on the A string right here, and we're just gonna place this hand here, and we're just gonna go down bow, and then up, and let's go down again, and up. Awesome. Now let's go to the D string. We're gonna move you over to the D, and then down, and up, and down, and up. I think you're like a natural. How does it feel holding the violin again?
You know, I was always, so my son, he had a little tiny violin.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't think I ever, by the time he was up on a full size, I never held it. So I was always the little tiny ones. And, so it's kind of nice to have, you got a lot more room
to maneuver around. Yeah. Do you want to try to place your fingers on the fingerboard here? Sure. Let's just try that. So we're holding this up, and then we're going to play on the A string. Oh, look at you. See, you don't need me. Okay, we're going to place our first finger here, and then we'll play right here on the A string. Look at you. Great. And now let's put our second finger here, but we want to be as relaxed as we can. Oh, you want to do a low two or a high? Okay, great. And relax here and go down. All right. That's it. Now how about third finger here? Oh my gosh, we're going for 3. Okay, there's a little. There you go.
All right.
Hey.
All right. At some point, I knew how to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
Do you want to?
I've forgotten.
Uh oh. He's going for it. A. Go ahead. A E. E. First finger. And then 3. Hey! Hey, man.
Good
that
job.
was great. Great job. That was great. I'm really impressed that you were able to do that.
Oh, no, thank you.
So how many years ago was that?
Well, he was like 5, so I guess it was 13 years ago.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, it's still there.
Thank you.
All right.
It's like riding a bicycle.
Well, I was going to say, I'll look forward to welcoming you back for your next violin lesson.
Okay, we'll do that.
Eduardo, thank you so much for being on this show today. It was really great to have you here at our studio.
Thanks for inviting me. It's always good to talk with you.
It's always great to see you.
Yeah.
And thank you as well for joining us for this episode of Youth Voices. I'm Dr. Quinton Morris. Enjoy your day.